And welcome back, fourth and long fans. It's your AFL correspondent, Coach Donnie Hess here, and today we have a very special guest coming all the way from Melbourne, Australia. It's Chief Editor of Draft Central, Pete Williams. How you doing, Pete?
Yeah, really good. Thanks, Donnie. Looking forward to having a chat about all things footy.
Always awesome, always awesome. And he joins me today to kind of run over the AFL draft and kind of what happened last week. And unfortunately, Ross was a little bit busy, so I thought I'd take the lead. And I found Peter online, and I thought this would be an awesome way to kind of show both American fans and even some of our Aussie fans a little bit about how this draft went and kind of how everything kind of turned out. So going with you, Peter, I got to ask, going right off the bat, were there any picks in the kind of the top 10 of this year's draft that kind of surprised you?
Well, it wasn't necessarily in the top 10 that surprised me. The order they went was a little surprising. Like, I think this has been a different draft to most drafts because nearly every draft, you know who's going to be pick one heading into the draft. And it wasn't until the last, say, few days before that we knew that chances are Adelaide was going to bid on Jamari Ugle-Hagan, of course, tied to the Bulldogs through a next generation academy that they have here. And then when we found that out, even then there was the toss-up between Logan McDonald and Riley Tilthorpe for Adelaide, which never happened. So for the first time ever, no one over here got three picks onwards correct. Everyone usually gets the top 5 or 6, and then there might be a surprise. But this year it was just a real intriguing one heading in. I think North Melbourne with Will Phillips at pick 3 was the first surprise. He's a very consistent midfielder. He'll probably be a 200, 250 game AFL player, really consistent. But North Melbourne have a lot of players that play his position. So therefore, it was a bit of a surprise in there. But I mean, for the most part, most of it went as we'd sort of expect with the players in there. And I think Adelaide with pick 11 was the first sort of shock when they took Luke Pedlar because no one was expecting him to go that high. So I'd say the 10 wasn't too surprising. Maybe you'd have, say, Zach Reed or Nick Cox. We thought one of them might slide. We weren't sure if Essendon were going to take both talls, but they did in the end. And the only other one was Tanner Bruhn, who we expected to go top 10, and he went 12th. So overall, it wasn't, if you look at it from a top 12, I reckon 11 of them were as you'd expect, and it was mostly Luke Pedlar at 11 that was a bit of a surprise there.
Yeah, I definitely, when I was watching it, all the draft boards, and I'm a Sydney Swan supporter, so when Logan McDonald found his way to us at pick 4, I was definitely a little shocked. I could not believe that somehow he fell to us. I think with many of the people that I had talked with, it sounded like Denver Granger Barras was like a lock until all of a sudden, well, there's Logan McDonald sitting there at 4. Oh my gosh, and it was kind of a surprise. So I think that kind of threw me a little bit, at least. I'm not sure about you, especially when Phillips went there at 4.
Well, it's interesting you mentioned Sydney because Sydney's a team that we had intel on, and we
Mhm.
knew that they were never going to pick Granger Barras. But the way that the media has it here is that there's the sort of, they're very good at hiding it. Like, they're very good at having this perception out there, this is who we're going to pick, and then everyone sort of goes with it. And we sort of had that little bit of insider knowledge that they'd actually ranked Logan McDonald at 1, then like Elijah Hollins, Will Phillips, and then Granger Barras. So the chances are, unless those 3 went, they were always going to pick one of the other 3. We thought that they'd end up with Phillips because we thought North would pick McDonald and
Mhm.
Phillips would be there for Sydney to pick. But then with Logan McDonald there, that was actually who Sydney ranked as their best player in the draft. So apart from Ugle-Hagan, but he was the best available player. So Sydney actually got their top pick with their selection, which they'd be very, very happy with.
Yeah, I definitely have to say that having that forward to replace Buddy and Zach and Sam Reed eventually was definitely one of those that I was definitely very, very happy to see. In your opinion, throughout the draft, I would say, who's a really good value pick that came late in this draft, say after pick 25?
Yeah, well, there's quite a few because, like, even though this draft probably isn't as strong as previous drafts, there was a lot of players that I felt evened out after the top 20, which was quite interesting. And I mean, for me, I think Errol Goulden, for example, even though he was tied to Sydney, is someone I rate inside the top 20. And personally, I think if he was 10 centimeters taller, he'd probably be top 10. So that's probably the one setback with him. So he's really great value. I think Eddie Ford at pick 56 to North Melbourne was a real great value kind of selection. I thought he did really well. Hawthorn did really well to grab Connor Downey at 35 because he's better. Fremantle with their 2 academy picks, Brandon Walker, Joel Weston, they're probably top 30 picks. So they've done really well with that. And then, Collingwood to also grab sort of not only Reef McInnes with 23, which is probably that little bit later than we expected, could have gone top 10. Also Caleb Poulter there with 30. So they're quite good value picks. But I think overall, perhaps even Jack Carroll to Carlton, he was rumoured to be top 20 and went at 41. So there's quite a good mix of value players that have gone a bit later, but that's because the draft this year after that top group is so even for probably 30, 40 picks. So there was always going to be some sliders and then a few surprise picks early.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I noticed in the Fox Footy rankings that there were several guys in the top 30 that were somehow finding their way into the 40s and 50s. I was like, that's really good value there, especially. In your opinion, kind of going off this, are there any players in this draft that right now can step in and be in the top 22 for their club going into next year?
Yeah, most of them would have selected someone. Like if we look at the first one that comes to mind, Will Phillips will start straight away for North Melbourne. He'll be one that just lock and load straight in there. Lockie Jones could play for Port early on. Like Logan McDonald's had the senior experience. I'd expect him to step straight in. And even Campbell and Goulden won't be too far off. So Sydney have got ones that could step in. Ugle-Hagan will probably play very early for the Dogs. Elijah Hollins, he obviously had his knee injury this year, so missed the entire year. But if he was fit to go, he'd start in Gold Coast starting team. And then Fremantle have like Heath Chapman as well, who's played senior footy over in Western Australia. So he's right to go as well. And probably Finlay McRae for Collingwood's another one who's right to go, and probably Ollie Henry. But there's quite a few there. And, of course, James Rowe for Adelaide has played senior footy, as has Riley Tilthorpe. So, and James Rowe is just a fantastic story as well, being a mature ager, even though he's probably 22. Like, he's sort of missed out on a few drafts and finally got his chance. So, there's a few mature ages or, say, more experienced people who have played senior footy that are ready to go for quite a few clubs in there.
Yeah, it's very interesting to me just to kind of see that each team kind of handles their youngsters differently, but there's so many talented kids, and I can't wait to see kind of next year who's going to be in the top 22s and that in round one. But so going in your opinion, who would you say would be the top 3 teams that had the best draft?
Yeah, the best draft. I think for certainly the value, I think for value-wise, Collingwood and Carlton are the 2 teams that had great value because they didn't have super high picks. Collingwood had a couple of top 20s, but late in the top 20, they enter at 17. So they were able to do a lot of live trading, which makes it interesting. So they were able to end up with 5 picks inside the top 31, which was great for them. So I think they've done really well. Corey Durden and Jack Carroll for Carlton, they did what they had to do for their picks, and certainly obviously Sydney as well. I quite like their selections, even though I guess you'd say they sort of were never going to lose coming in because you knew they'd match their 2 academy kids who theoretically are top 20 picks pretty easily, and then you get the pick before they go. So definitely them, and of course the Bulldogs is the other team. Like you get Ugle-Hagan for nothing, effectively a handful of picks in the 30s and 40s, which is the way it works. But yeah, they're certainly the teams I thought did the best out of all of them.
Okay, and then kind of on the opposite realm, were there any teams that you were kind of disappointed in their drafts?
Well, it's sort of a bit difficult to say whether disappointing because they've sort of got their own goals. I guess in a way I was a little surprised with a couple of the teams, mostly I'd say Richmond. I knew they were going to get Rioli Jr., so that wasn't too much of a surprise. But over here where the rucks are rated, they went for Samson Ryan, who he's a mature ager. He's 20 years old. He's sort of that 206 centimetre ready to go ruck. So they went and picked someone like that rather than, say, a project tall, because a lot of the other rucks who are rated highly are project. So that kind of, it wasn't necessarily bad for them, but for them it was a bit of a surprise because a lot of people had a lot of other rucks rated higher, and they obviously wanted someone who's ready to slot in if, say, they get an injury next year to a key player or something like that, which was interesting. And then the other one was St Kilda, because St Kilda had they picked up Matt Allison, who has a lot of potential, but I don't think many people were expecting him to go super, super high and went at 26. And then Tom Highmore was a pretty good get, but again, a mature ager. So they're sort of looking at players that can slot straight in. So I think they were quite interesting. And even Geelong, too, taking Max Holmes, who realistically has played one game type thing or barely any footy at that NAB league level, to suddenly come in and go at pick 20. So there are a few surprises, but I think that's what makes the draft. So yeah, I was a little surprised by some of the selections, but at the end of the day, it comes down to what the teams are after, and whether they're willing to wait to develop players or whether they just need a quick fix now.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think it's really hard because you're not in there sitting in their war rooms going, what do we need? What are we looking at? So it's not always easy. So, and this is a fun question that I heard this being discussed a little bit. I guess maybe for me, I'm an American fan. I'm used to the NFL draft being 3 days long. Round one is the first day, round two and three is the second day. But you go to your virtual draft in your first in this draft, and I'd heard people complaining this draft was too long. In your opinion, do you think the draft was too long this year? Or I mean, was it more of all of the kind of with all of the bid matching and all that? Was that kind of the reason that this draft seemed to just kind of drag on all night?
Yeah, it stretched out a lot longer because there were going to be less picks than usual. Like, we've always had a one night draft, but we had 2 nights last year, which they trialed, and no one really seemed to like that because you sort of had the first round and then you'd go home and then come back, which is obviously a bit foreign to Australians over here. We're used to sort of having the one night, everyone done. And obviously for some players that didn't get picked on that first night, it was a bit of a nervous wait to the next day. But like for this draft, it just dragged on because I think they were sort of trying to get interviews with every player they could. And then you also had that, yeah, you had all the bid matching and all the trades, and they were just taking the maximum time, like the 5 minutes between picks, and you're sort of sitting there going, all right, this is taking a while. Like, you could go a lot quicker, but if they'd gone at a normal pace, then they probably would have had the draft over in an hour or so,
Mm-hmm.
and that wouldn't look as good for optics from their perspective. But they certainly took a lot longer than usual, and yeah, it's certainly with a lot of bid matching, as well as the live trades. It just made it a bit more difficult, a bit more longer, which didn't really help. I guess those who just wanted to see who their team picked up.
Yeah, I can understand that. Like I said, it's just I'm so used to the NFL draft and it's 7 rounds, but it takes 3.5 days, so it's absolutely insane. So it was kind of interesting to hear some of the people that were like, "It's too long." So going off that, so you get the glitz and the glamour of the futures draft, and then the next day you have the rookie draft. I mean, there wasn't as many picks going in that. Do you kind of have like a quick recap? Was there any kind of surprising picks in the rookie draft, anything like that, or was it kind of just a normal rookie draft?
Well, there's always a few surprising ones. There was a kid called Jack Saunders from Norwood who went to Hawthorn. He's the only player we didn't actually have in our draft guide, which was rather annoying. Otherwise, we had it all perfect
Mhm.
for everyone there. But yeah, he was a little bit of a surprise. He's a ball winner, got a few things to work on, cleanliness and whatnot, but he's a natural ball winner. So Hawthorn have picked him up as more of a ready to go type. It was great to see a few mature ages get a go again, but Isaac Chugg, who went to Collingwood with their last selection, was a bit of a surprise because a couple of Tasmanians didn't get drafted that a lot of people thought might get drafted, which was a little surprising. But it was mostly those players who have had maybe a few things to work on, because the difference is they get 1 year contracts instead of two. So it's not as big of a commitment, I guess, for clubs to pick them. And they also use the rookie draft to redraft a lot of existing players, which it was definitely the oldest rookie draft they've ever had. Like, there's quite a few that were over 30 that got put on the rookie list and everything like that. So, and for players that might have retired, but they've still got to pay them out salary wise, they put them on the rookie list. So like Bryce Gibbs was pick one and he's not going to play next year. They just
Mhm.
put him on there because of salary purposes. So, it's things like that. The rookie draft is no longer really for rookies per se. There's a few, but it's probably 50-50 between picking up new kids and then just recycling people from their senior list onto their rookie list.
Yeah, I was kind of noticing that there were a few names in that rookie draft that I was like, "Whoa, isn't he?" And so it was very confusing, and it is something that sometimes I have to double check. Is like, yeah, they can delist guys, and then redraft them as rookies, and then it changes the contract and different stuff like that. So I always think it's a very, very interesting discussion. So in your opinion, who would you say is the best value pick of the rookie drafts? I know it's kind of a weird draft since it was so old, but who do you think was the best value pick in the rookie draft this year?
Well, I think Jack Ginnivan was the one coming in that I thought was the best one left over from the day before, and he went to Collingwood pick 13, which was quite good. And I mean, when you've got a lot of teams that aren't picking up new rookies, there were probably, maybe 6 or 7 teams that picked up new rookies. So, I mean, you're always going to have good value to pick up there. But certainly I think Jack Ginnivan and also Zane through the West Coast were probably the two that I was a little surprised made it through to the rookie draft. So I think that both West Coast and Collingwood did really well with their selections there.
Yeah, and that's definitely interesting. And then one of my last questions here, just because I know this year was so interesting with COVID and stuff like that, could you give me 3 names that did not get drafted this year that you think are definitely guys that we're going to see next year in either the regular draft or the rookie draft?
Yeah, I think it's going to be quite interesting. I think Jackson Callow is one from Tasmania that was really unlucky not to go. Obviously, out of North Launceston, key forward. He's probably just got that athleticism. He lacks a little bit, but he's a contested marking beast. I think he's definitely one to watch out for. Then you've got Max Heath, who was a ruck ready to go. He's more someone who has developed over the years, but he looked like a great player at the start of the year in preseason. But he's probably one that has traditionally had issues with COVID that perhaps wouldn't have had otherwise, because he was starting to look great. They'd said, "Oh, he's going to be the Vic Metro ruck for this year." Like, they'd all committed to him, and we expected him to be the first ruck selected for that, which was a bit surprising that he didn't go. So there's definitely a couple. And then there's a lot of sort of 19-year-olds who missed out on the rookie draft or the normal draft because of the way that they sort of went. And I think that you've got to consider some of them as well. Like, you've got Liam Delahunty, Darcy Churgwin's another one from Sandringham, who was probably the most unlucky not to go last year. And then unfortunately he goes back to play 19-year-old and doesn't get to play a game this year. So I think the 19-year-olds are the ones from this year that are probably most impacted by the fact that COVID hit, like the Victorian ones, because you've gone back to play another year, you just missed out, got to work on a few things, and then you can't play. So there's a few that I think we could see lift up there. So certainly I think Darcy Churgwin's one that could step up and play at the next level as well.
Well, Peter, this has been an absolutely awesome conversation. It's really, really cool to be able to chat with somebody that has so much knowledge of these youngsters. I know for our American fans, it's going to be a lot of names thrown at them that they may not know. But I have to say that I got your guide earlier this year, and I thought that was absolutely amazing, the details that you came with, and for being somebody that does not know these kids very well, it helped me go into the draft knowing a little bit more. So I want to thank you, you guys at Draft Central, for putting out such an awesome guide. And I hope again that you guys can continue doing that, because I think it's really, really helpful for guys like me that have podcasts over here in the States, that we want to be informed of who are some of these new kids are coming in and into our clubs each and every year.
No worries. We enjoy doing it. It takes quite a long time and a lot of work and effort, but I mean, in a way, it's the reward for effort at the end of the day, because we spend a lot of time during the year watching them and writing about them and taking notes, and then that's sort of like the summary of what we do throughout the year, and comes out in a nice book that we can look back, and then in a couple of years you can look back, see which ones you got right, which ones you got wrong, or how they've fared since then. It's always a great resource to go look back at in future years.
Yeah, so it was just absolutely awesome, and I want to thank you again for taking the time out of your busy day. I know you're sitting in your car right now, and I don't want to take out too much more of your time, sir. So I greatly appreciate your time. You have a great day, sir, and we'll talk to you later.
No worries. Thanks very much for having me on.
And that's it, Fourth and Long fans. We'll talk to you again soon.